Okay, we'll start with the invocation. Bhunaji is not yet in, so Anu, could you do the initial invocation? Sahana Vavadu.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vipvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Gita chapter 8, 10th session. And today we will be covering all the verses like 26, 27, and 28. That completes the topic listed in this chapter. And next week we can do a whole recap and any discussions or any question answers we can do. And after that we can move to the next chapter, which is pretty much aligned with the theme of the Gita. So this chapter is in fact a deviation from the other chapter's topic, but nevertheless this chapter is important. We learned something new. We had a lot of good discussions, especially the subject matter of this chapter is a matter of faith. So we talked a lot about what is faith and what should be the criteria for us to believe in believe something or not. So if you really look at even this is Shankaracharya's methodology. So if you want to believe something which cannot be verified or proved, what you may have to do is, first of all, that belief has to be reasonable. I'm just repeating it because just keep this in mind. This is the style we have been using. So the belief has to be reasonable. And the second one is that the belief has to be beneficial. If these two criteria are not met, it's up to us whether to believe or not. Because if it is not reasonable and if it is not beneficial, I don't know, like it is up to you. So this chapter's content, especially the Kramamukti path, I don't know whether it is reasonable and is it beneficial? I don't know, because none of us are that much practicing yogi in the modern age. So, but again, it is better to understand what is described in the scriptures. So this chapter is a matter of belief. You can choose to believe or not to believe. That is not going to impact your faith in Gita. That is not going to impact in your spiritual progress. Having said that, let's do a little bit of chanting. So Anu, I would request you to chant 24 to 28, and then we can cover the 3 verses.
Sure. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Atha Ashtamodhyayah Akshara Parabrahma Yogaha. Agnerjyotirrahashya Agnerjyotirahashuklaha Shanmasa Uttarayanam Tatra Prayata Gachanti Brahma Vido Janaha Dhumo Ratristatha Krishnaha Shanmasa Dakshinayanam Tatra Chandramasam Jyotihi Yogi Prapya Nivartate Shukla Krishne Gati Hyete Jagata Shashvate Mate Ekaya Yatyana Vrittim Anyaya Vartate Punaha नैते श्रुति पार्थ जानन् योगी मुह्यति कश्चन तस्मात् सर्वेषु कालेषु योगयुक्तो भवार्जुन वेदेषु यज्ञेषु तपस्सु चैव दानेषु यत् पुण्यफलं प्रदिष्टम् अत्येति तत्सर्वमिदं विदित्वा योगी परं स्थानमुपैति चाद्यम् वेदेषु यज्ञेषु तपस्सु चैव दानेषु यत् पुण्यफलं प्रदिष्टम् अत्येति तत्सर्वमिदं विदित्वा योगी परं स्थानमुपैति चाद्यम् ॐ तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे अक्षरपरब्रह्मयोगो नाम अष्टमोऽध्यायः.
Excellent. That was the final verses of this chapter. So if you remember, right, we talked about two types of muktis. One is Krama Mukti and the other one is Jivan Mukti. Jivan Mukti means while you are alive, you come to know the truth about yourself through knowledge. So you are instantly liberated, and once the body is over, there is no rebirth and there is no gati or travel or transmigration of the soul, because the soul also will be dismantled. Just like the physical body is dismantled, the soul also will be dismantled, and you establish your identity with the absolute reality. So that is Jivan Mukti. And for a Jivan Mukta, there is no transmigration. So that's what we saw first. And then for the practicing yogis, there are two possibilities. One is yogis who are very much close to their final stage. They have acquired their purity of the mind through the Karma Yoga, and they gained a mastery of their mind through the Upasana Yoga. Such people for whom the Antakarana Shuddhi is gained, but they haven't liberated yet, because the Shravanam, Mananam, Nidithyasanam is not yet fully happened. Such yogis, when they deliberately leave their body through the advanced yogic practices, they take a path called Shukla Gati. We saw that there are laws of nature that governs the day, the Shukla Paksha and Uttarayana. So those are the deities that takes your soul to the Brahmaloka. The destination is Brahmaloka. And what happens is that soul will not come back to earth. That soul will be given the teaching at Brahmaloka, and that soul will eventually get liberation there. So it's a two-staged mukti or a moksha. Or like you take a flight from India to New York, right? It means olden days we used to take a transit to Frankfurt or London. So this is like that. You are not directly going to the moksha, but you are going to take a transit, and at the transit place you will be given the teachings and you will get liberated. So this is Krama Mukti. But those who do not have that much advanced control of the mind, those who are not that much upasakas, what they do is they take the other route, which is known as Krishna Gati. The deities that governs that Gati is Krishna Paksha, the moonlight. The other case, it was daylight, moonlight, and it is actually governed by Dakshinayana. And this soul will go to Pitraloka, and from Pitraloka, depending upon Prarabdha Karma, it will come back. Of course, it will come back to a good state, and then they will continue. So these two were the paths we discussed in the last class. Any questions? Now, if you are taking the Jivan Mukta path, none of them is relevant. That's just an FYI. So with that, let's go to the next verse, which is 26. So Anu, could you chant?
Yeah. शुक्लकृष्णे गतिह्येते जगतः शाश्वते मते एकया यात्यनावृत्तिम् अन्यया वर्तते पुनः.
Okay, so he is just summarizing the two paths we discussed earlier. So Krishna said, Shukla Krishna Gatir Hyete, Hi Ete. These two paths, Krishna and Shukla. Shukla Krishna Gati Hi Eti Ete. So these two paths, which are the path, the Krishna Gati and Shukla Gati, Jagataha Shashwate Mate. So in this world, it is considered as relatively eternal path. Please don't get confused. Eternal means if you take that path, it will take long time for you to get liberation. Whereas Jivan Mukti, you get liberated instantly. If you take Krishna Shukla Gati, what happens? You will have to go to the Brahmaloka, and from Brahmaloka, you need to expose to the teachings of the Brahmaji. And when you get exposed to the teaching of the Brahmaji, you will gain liberation eventually. But you know that, right? One day of Brahmaji is how long? Millions of years, if not billions of years. So when you consider your lifespan here, even that path is it's a long path. Whereas if you take the other path, which is what? The Krishna Gati, you will have to come back, you have to reborn, and you have to gain Antakarna Shuddhi, and you have to gain Moksha. So whatever path you take, whether it is Krishna Gati or Shukla Gati, Jagataha Shashwate Mataha. So Shankaracharya tells it is relatively eternal, as if it's a long path. So therefore, right, Ekaya Yati Anavruti. One path, there is no avruti. Avruti means return. So if you take the Shukla Gati, the soul will not come back. That is the only difference. Ekaya Yati Anavruti Manyayavartane Punaha. Whereas the other path, it has frequency. So if you take the Krishna Gati, you will have to come back and reborn again and exhaust your karmas. Whereas if you take the Shukla Gati, there was no comeback. But whether it is Krishna Gati or Shukla Gati, you won't get the liberation immediately. It is going to take some time for you to get liberated.
So Rajeshji, question: Are all jivas, all souls, they have to take one of these three paths?
Absolutely, all souls has to take one of these three paths. So
there's no choice, right? You
choice.
are in one of those.
Yep.
One of these three.
Yep.
Okay. And also Shukla Gati, Krishna Gati, Jivan Mukti.
Yeah.
It has to be one of these three, right? And which path you are on is dependent on your karma.
Depending upon the stage of your evolution, right? So 99.99 people are Krishna Gati. So because they are not advanced yogis, only advanced yogis goes through Shukla Gati. That's it. And that's what, again, as I was explaining earlier, this is a matter of faith. That's it. Therefore, the next verse, Krishna gives a brilliant advice. So the whole idea is whether you take Krishna Gati or Shukla Gati, it's not instant liberation. It is going to take a lot of time. Whereas if you gain Jivan Mukti, what is going to happen?
Instant.
You get liberated here itself. So which path we should all try? Jivan Mukti, that's all. And Jivan Mukti is not a matter of belief. We have seen, we can, it means we are not saying that this is not a post-mortem reward. You can try and practice here itself. So my personal take is, forget about Krishna Gati and Shukla Gati. You do that, right? So you try to do your practice, and as much as you practice, even if you may not make it, but you will be born in a conducive environment where you will be exposed to these teachings. Look at each one of our case. I was in India, born in the land of Shankaracharya, never exposed to this teaching, got exposed to this teaching, right? It's very interesting. So if you have that karma, somehow or the other, this teaching will come to you, guaranteed. All of us are like that. See, imagine how many thousands of people are there. Out of that, we got an opportunity to study this in detail and practice it. So that's the thing. So with that, we can go to the next verse. These verses are not highly complicated verses. These are summarization. Okay, so let's hear the next verse from Anu.
नैते श्रुति पार्थ जानन् योगी मुह्यति कश्चन तस्मात् सर्वेषु कालेषु योगयुक्तो भवार्जुन.
Very important verse. Krishna is concluding the teaching by saying that what? Tasmat, meaning therefore. Sarveshu kaleshu. What does that mean? Sarva means all time. Kaleshu means time. Sarveshu kaleshu means start right now. What?
Yoga.
Yoga yukto bhavarjuna. Practice yoga. So, lot of people have doubt. What? I can chant the name of God at the end of my life, I will be liberated. Lot of people conclude, has that misunderstanding after reading this chapter, especially after talking about this Shukla Gati and Krama Mukti, etc. But look at what Krishna concluded, last two verses. The previous verse he said, even if you take the Shukla Gati, it is a relatively lengthy path. You won't get liberation instantly. Whether it is Shukla Gati or Krishna Gati, that is the fact. And then he said what? Therefore, tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhavarjuna. Be a spiritual practitioner right now here. That's what it is. So let's see the verses, right? He said, na ete shruti partha. Naitai shruti. Na etai. Etai shruti. Meaning, etai shruti means these two paths. What are the two paths he is talking? Krishna Gati and Shukla Gati. So, na means ete shruti partha. These two paths, O Arjuna. And then he'll say, Janan, knowing. Once you know these two paths, what is Krishna Gati and what is Shukla Gati, and the time taken for getting the liberation. So, ete shruti partha janan. Janan means known. So, once you know these two paths, yogi muhyati kaschana. The yogi will freed from all the delusions. So what is that delusion? Delusion, one of the delusion is what? I can chant at the end of the life and go to the heaven or go to the place. Second thing is that even if you go to the heaven, you will have to come back. And the only option for getting freedom from all suffering is knowledge. So you have to practice that. So once you know the details of all the path, whether it is going to Brahmaloka, we saw that, right? The Brahmaloka is also subjected to destruction. And the soul will have to come back again and again. Remember, I gave the example of this merry-go-round. The children like to go to merry-go-round. No doubt. You all like to live this life. But when we do not have, let's say that the child do not have a control when to enter into this merry-go-round and when to get out, how difficult it is going to be. Correct? See, the game becomes interesting when I have a choice. I can enter now, I can exit later. And if I don't know when I'm entering, in between, I'm just put into this merry-go-round. For some time, I will go. I want to get out, I cannot get out. I don't want to get out, I'll be forced to get out. So that is the stage of the life, whether it is heaven or any life. So once you know the truth of both these paths, that is what na ete smriti partha yogi mukhyati kaschanaha. Therefore, once you know the temporal nature or the time taken of both these paths and all the possible destination of the soul, including heaven or Brahmaloka, you wanted to try for that Jivan Mukti right here. So tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhavarjuna. Therefore, right from now, you start practicing yoga. So when you say yoga here, what is the yoga means? Remember, the other day we talked about what is yoga. It was in the Vedanta class, but let me just give you a very high level. The yoga, the sound yoga means, it can mean two things. The first one is yuj, melane or yojane. Yojane means what? Or melane means what? Connection or union or joining. So what? The Jivatma joins with the Paramatma, or Jivatma get connected with Paramatma. The Jivatma knows its true identity as Paramatma. So from that perspective, the highest meaning of the yoga Shabda is what? Liberation, moksha. So depending upon the stage in which the yogi is practicing, the word yoga means different things, but the purpose is different. So if you have the Antakarna Shuddhi, which is a pure and a stable mind, yoga applies to Jnana Yoga. That means knowing your own truth and really getting liberated. So that is what one meaning of yoga here, if you are in that stage. But if you are a beginner, the yoga Shabda means Yujra iti samadho or Yujra iti nirodha. It refers to nirodha or niruddha. What is nirodha by any means? Anybody knows? What is nirodha?
Deny.
In
Stop
fact,
it.
that is a negative interpretation.
The
So if you go to the
control.
Sanskrit dictionary, the word nirodha or niruddha means eliminating a possibility. Right? That's what it is. Eliminating a possibility. For example, you have a possibility, we all have a possibility of getting corona right now because of so many people are spreading it right outside. So how do you control it or how do you prevent it? By taking the vaccination. So that vaccination, the act of taking that vaccination can be considered as nirodha. So look at the water, a huge river. When it floods, what is going to happen? It will destroy the entire village. How do you prevent that possibility?
Dam.
So your mind, I was reading this beautiful interpretation of the word nirodha by Patanjali's commentary, right? Vyasa. It's brilliant. So he gave these two, I mean, the corona example is my example, but the dam example is the example given. So your mind has so much of possibilities. What type of vrittis come to my mind? I have no idea. Binding attachments can come. A lot of vulgar thoughts can come. So I am putting some practice, some sadhanas to avoid that. To keep my mind in a stable, in a controlled, in a healthy state, I am putting some practice. Right? physical yoga, what it is, you are putting some practices for that. For what? For being flexible, for being away from some diseases, to avoid some possibility of the diseases. So that is what is yoga. So nirodha is yoga. So you are doing something proactively to prevent something, to gain a healthy mental state. You are doing some sadhanas. So that is also yoga. So here what Krishna is saying is that tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhavarjuna. So you be a yoga practitioner. Please don't listen. Some people interpret this as then go and do the asanas from tomorrow. That's not what it meant. Asana is just one part of the yoga. So that's why I was trying to explain the entire scope of yoga. On the highest end, it is the jnana yoga. On the beginning stage, it is karma yoga. Karma yoga, upasana yoga, jnana yoga. And any other practices, the prefix or the adjective refers to the type of practice. If you use your devotion as a means to gain control over your mind, that practice becomes bhakti yoga. Simple bhakti is not bhakti yoga. Simple bhakti means I'm just praying to God or loving God. But the bhakti becomes yoga when you do with certain attitude. So the hatha yoga, all these yogas, kundalini yoga, nada yoga, all these are practices for preventing something or gaining control over something in the initial stage, which could be your body, which could be your prana, or which could be your mind. And finally, once you have that stable, pure, calm mind, that mind you can use to gain the union. So these two meanings are important of yoga. One meaning of yoga is nirodha or samadhi. Second meaning of the yoga, which is the highest meaning, is union or self-realization. So underline this one verse and eliminate all the doubt. This is not subjected to any doubt or any interpretation, right? It is not Shankaracharya's interpretation. It's Krishna's direct words. Krishna didn't say that Jivan Mukti or Krama Mukti is the ideal path. He said Jivan Mukti or the Krama Mukti, both are going to take a lot of time. Therefore, you just start practicing the yoga now. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. He negates the possibility of this misinterpretation of chanting the name of the Lord at the end and getting liberated instantly. That's not what is meant by the Gita. And I have no idea from where in the world people got this idea. This verse is very clear. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhavarjuna. Mind you, when somebody passes, chanting the name of the God is good. Absolutely good. Right? When somebody passes away, he should be a blessed heart for hearing the name of the God. Absolutely. It will reduce the pressure. It will make that journey most that would be the best way of departing a soul, by chanting the name of the Lord. But let's not misunderstand that as an instant means for gaining realization. If that was the case, it would have been so easy. Okay? So let's go to the final verse of this chapter. Now the meter changes.
वेदेषु यज्ञेषु तपस्सु चैव दानेषु यत् पुण्यफलं प्रदिष्टम् अत्येति तत्सर्वमिदं विदित्वा योगी परं स्थानमुपैति चाद्यम्.
Again, he talks about the merit of this yoga. So Shankaracharya tells brilliantly, he says, like there is a brilliant explanation. He gives, Shankaracharya shall Shrunu Yogasya Mahatmyam. Because the previous verse he made an instruction, a suggestion Krishna made to all of us. What was that suggestion? Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhava Arjuna. So you practice yoga all the time. Now you listen to the merit of that yoga. What is the merit or the benefits of that yoga? So he tells, now you can see the meter changed from Anushtup to Drishtup. You can see more number of letters in one verse. So this is another style. The Gita follows 2 meter. One is Drishtup and the another one is Anushtup. So this word, whenever the meter changes, he's just highlighting a point. That's all. Because at that time it was an oral tradition. People used to learn this chanting by heart, and when the meter changes, it immediately gain attention. That is the purpose. So he tells, Vedeshu yajneshu tapassi chaiva. So Veda, the study of the scriptures. Yajna, sacrifices. Tapas, consistent effort to gain something, right? Cha eva, along with dana. Dana means charity. What they gain by doing these good activities, what you gain is punya. They are definitely good. So remember, we talked about this in the law of karma. So whenever you do a good action or a bad action, there are 2 types of results. One is called drishta phala and the other one is called adrishta phala. The adrishta phala is what we called as punyam or papam. So the punyam is going to give me some good experience in the future. Papam is going to give me some unconducive experiences. So this Veda, the study, reading of the Veda or the scriptures, yajna, like the sacrifices, the rituals, tapas, meaning here the consistent effort to gain money or position or even any social work or whatever it is. And dana, the charity, all are good acts. No doubt about it. And what is the result of doing that? You will get punyam. And the punyam is going to give you a better, some conducive situations in the future. But here Krishna tells, phalam pradishtam. So this act is going to give you some punyam. Then he tells, atyeti tatsarvamidam viditva. But a person who knows all these two, right? So not these two, the person who knows this, Krishna uses a pronoun this, these, by these here means the answers to the 7 questions he has given. Remember when the beginning of the chapter, Arjuna asked 7 questions. What is Brahman? What is Athyatma? What is Atideva? What is Atipuda? What is Atiyajna? And what happens to the soul after the death? Or what happens to a person who can control the mind at the time of the death? So the person who knows answers to all the questions you asked, he knows any good act, even if it is the best act, where it takes you only to Brahmaloka, or it can take you to the Pitraloka, and both the path is not going to give you the liberation. So even if you earn a lot of punya, it won't give you liberation. The only way for liberation is knowledge. So he tells, yogi param sthanam upaiti chadyam. So the yogi who knows the truth, the who knows about himself, the yogi who knows the true nature of himself, he attains yogi param. Param sthanam. Param sthanam means the ultimate destination. The ultimate destination is the self-realization. So a yogi who practices yoga, who gains purity of the mind, stability of the mind, and through knowledge, when he knows himself, where does he reach? He reached the most ultimate destination. The most ultimate destination, upaidi chadyam. Adyam, the primordial destination, which is the absolute reality. So the last verse again he tells, whatever spiritual practices you do, other means it is going to give you some good results in the future, no doubt. Even if you go to heaven, you will have to come back. Whereas if you practice yoga, the same karma, the same yajna, the same dana, the same all these practices, when you practice as yoga, it is going to take you to the highest destination. So this verse is just an explanation or a supporting verse for the statement he made. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhava Arjuna. So the bottom line is practice yoga. So you can see in Bhagavad Gita, every argument Krishna makes, finally what is the advice? Practice yoga. Swami Chinmayananda used to tell a beautiful story. I'll just tell that story. It's so funny. So in our times and all, when we were in India, in English exams, they used to ask comprehensive, like an essay. So in local medium, Malayalam or Tamil or Hindi medium language, they have no idea about English. So what they do is the teachers will give them a small paragraph. You by heart the paragraph. And when you get that in the exam, you write it down. So one guy, he studied about coconut tree. In the first exam, they didn't ask about coconut tree. Instead, they asked about a cow. So what did he do? He wrote like cow is a good animal, right? And then he said a cow is typically can be tied in a coconut tree. Then he started writing about the whole coconut tree. Coconut tree is a wonderful tree. It means every part of the coconut tree is useful, etc., etc., etc. Next time he was 100% sure. This time they're going to ask about coconut tree. But in that next exam, what is going to happen? What did happen? They asked about a hen. So this guy wrote, hen is a very useful bird. Typically, a hen is not tied in a coconut tree. Then he started writing about the coconut tree. So this is what it is. So in Bhagavad Gita, that is the style. Anything you start, Krishna will finally come back to one advice. What is that advice?
Yoga.
Yoga. Practice yoga. But this is a very valid advice. If you practice yoga, there are different stages of yoga, and this yoga is going to take you to the highest destination. And this is what is the true meaning of yoga. This is the yoga that is envisioned by Patanjali. This is what is the yoga envisioned by Krishna. This is what is the yoga taught in the scriptures. People can call themselves as yoga, actually yogis, and I see people put names yogi, etc. Or you can call people as, like, even the other day somebody was mentioning like so many titles they can add. And I don't want to, this is not joking. We called one person for one of the program, and he was telling us to add a title called Jagat Guru in front of him. Can you imagine? So people can put anything and everything in their name, but they may not be living up to the meaning of that. So be a yogi. That is the simple advice. So this chapter concludes here. This is called Akshara Brahma Yoga. The key theme of this chapter is Upasana Yoga. We will do a full recap next week, understanding the whole chapter from a holistic perspective. But let me pause here. Any questions? We have some time. I have 10-15 minutes. Any questions we can answer? Otherwise, we can have request Anu to chant the chapter. Whatever is good, we can do.
Rajesh, one question.
Yes, Deva.
When you summarize it, you mentioned that everything to be followed as like a yoga.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, is it like the attitude should be Ishwararpanam and Prasada Bhukti, for any action. So that's the only way you kind of like remove the footprint from that action.
Correct. Absolutely. That is the way. So I go to work every day and I do, say, program management or software engineering for a living. I can do that as a mere bound means a binding karma, or I can do that as a karma yoga. So when you do that as karma yoga, that very action becomes a spiritual practice. So karma yoga, again coming back to that good old definition, just remember this definition. It is proper work with proper attitude. These two are important. Proper work means knowingly you're not doing any tamasic work. As I said, like imagine this actions are like flowers you're offering in front of your favorite deity. You don't offer a rotten flower in front of the deity. So these tamasic actions, when you kill somebody, when you hurt somebody, when you do something wrong, that is like a rotten flower. You don't want to do that. So your action should be either rajasic, but it must have swatik actions. So practice Panchamahayajna in a frequency. For example, you can have that monthly frequency. My best guess tells me, or my experience tells me, this is me only, I haven't seen this in any scriptures. In a week, make sure that you practice the 5. That would be a good test. Every week, you read the scripture a little bit. That's why we have that rule of 3 verses per week, right? We discusses 3 verses of Gita. So if you can reflect upon those 3 verses, honestly speaking, we are doing 3 different classes. So 12 verses are there, but at least in one class, 3 verses, if you can read or if you can contemplate upon that, that would be great. Then Bhuda Yajna, right? Either you can pray for the nature, or you can plant a tree, water a tree, or you can take care of a pet, or you can donate some small amount to a pet store. The easy, or at least look at the nature and be thankful, because in Karma Yoga chapter we said, when you go out, I was reading Vivekananda, right? He was talking, when I see a plant, my mind goes down to that plant, because I know that that plant, the Ishvara is blessing me in the form of that plant. Imagine if that plant is not there, how do I breathe? It's all taken for granted, right? All these things are taken for granted. So at least be sensitive to the nature and don't hurt nature. That is Bhuta Yajna. Pitru Yajna, typically people do only Shraddham and such rituals and forget everything else. Spend some time with the family, 5 minutes. Talk to your children. Typically, it is attributed to parents only. Our immediate family means the people who are living with you is also important. If you don't talk to your immediate family, that's a problem. So spend some time with your spouse, child, relatives, and make a call to your parents or whatever it is. It is good. Spend some time with the family. Pitru Yajna. Manushya Yajna. Talk to somebody. Support somebody. Give a listening ear. Or like do something, or at least pray. That's it. Then the Deva Yajna, just have 5 minutes of prayer every day. 5 minutes of prayer can make a huge difference. You don't need to do a elaborate ritual. So this is very important. If you can do that every day, fantastic. But at least once in a week, you can make sure that all these check boxes are done. Then once you start doing that, bring that Ishwararpana Buddhi and Prasada Buddhi. When you do help a person, typically what is our attitude? I am helping him. Or if he don't behave the way I expect him to behave, I'm upset.
Yeah.
That's not karma yoga then. It is karma. Of course, that act will give you some punyam, but that won't become yoga. That is why the definition is important, right? Proper work with proper attitude. So when I help a person, my attitude should be, oh, I got an opportunity to worship my God. Remember when we talked karma yoga, I just explained. Your heart is beating right from the day you born until the last minute. How it happens? It is through some neural programming. There is no bug. It is faithfully executing. Every system is faithfully executing. You can see that yajna spirit everywhere in the universe. The moment you realize that, you cannot but appreciate that order. And that gives you a certain level of sensitivity. That means my action would be a thanksgiving to that Lord who made all these things, right? So, yata pravritti bhudanam yena sarvamidam tadam karmanat tadarchasya siddhim vindadi manavaha. 18th chapter. Chapter 18. Krishna concludes, brilliantly defines karma yoga. So the whole universe is manifested by whom? From whom the whole universe manifested, in whom the whole universe exists, and unto him the whole universe merges back. To that Lord, dedicate all your action. When you do that, you will attain siddhi. Siddhi means highest possibilities of life. Right?
Thanks, Rajesh.
This is karma yoga. And again, we talk about different things in Gita. We talked about the knowledge, we talked about Upasana yoga, but where is the beginning? It is karma yoga. Karma yoga and Upasana yoga. So that is what it is. Any other questions?
Rajaji, I had a question.
Sure.
So, Rajaji, when we pray to God for a particular benediction, for a particular desire that we have, you know, and since you spoke about Deva Yagna and prayer being a form of Deva Yagna, I wanted to ask if it's, you know, if it's okay to have wishes and to have desires when we are praying. That's one question. And follow-up question to that, Rajesh ji, is how do we maintain a, a sense of prasad buddhi or you know, Ishwar Arpana buddhi when what we are praying for doesn't manifest necessarily? How do we?
It's a very good question, right? So prayer is like any actions you perform. Prayer is a karma. That is the technical term governed in the Vedic scriptures. So a worldly karma, for example, why means, let's say that you're a farmer. You are planting some, like, say, something you are planting. Why? Because you're expecting a profit, right? There is nothing wrong in that. So you put all the effort expecting that profit. This is an action. So now let's take a karma. Sorry, a prayer. What is that prayer? I'm praying to God, oh God, I need to get that promotion. Let's take a simple, harmless example. So now the question is, if that prayer needs to be a yoga, karma yoga, it has to satisfy two conditions. What is that first condition? It has to be a proper work or a proper karma. So if I sit and pray that my neighbor should die, which category it goes to?
Tamasic.
Tamasic. So I need to make sure that my prayer should be either
Rajasic.
Rajasic. So if I pray for my promotion, there's nothing wrong in that. Okay, so that part is good. Now the second part is, if I pray and if I'm completely bound by the result, if I don't get the result, if I'm upset with the God, you say that means in Tamil and in Indian languages you have lyrics, the God doesn't have eyes, does he has ears, etc. People ask, right?
He's heartless.
Yeah, heartless, etc. So if you are that, why? Because you have binding desires. So you are not surrendering to the will of the God. So it's like the child around 8 o'clock this time goes to mommy and asks for a cookie. It is up to the child. Definitely it is within the right of the child to ask for a cookie. But who decides what is good for the child? The mother may not give the cookie. Instead, she may give a dinner at that point of time. Why?
Because mother knows what's best for the child.
Right. So now the child starts crying and crying and crying. What is going to happen? It doesn't benefit the child. So once you have the faith to that universal law, it is completely okay for me to put any request as long as it is not tamasic in front of the God. But I should have the grace and maturity to accept whatever given to me. So when you do this Panchamaha Yajna, I know that like what I told you as a simple technique, especially this is told me to means this simple advice was given to me by Swami Dayananda. It was a life-changing advice. He said, if you try to do the Ishwararpana Buddhi and Prasada Buddhi with your Rajasic action at the beginning, it is difficult. But when you pray for another person, or when you try to do a charity to another person, you can easily bring this Ishwararpana Buddhi and Prasada Buddhi.
Yes.
So the start with your Swatik action, and slowly, once you gain that, you can extend that to anything and everything. And I tried to practice it. It worked out very well. So this was the advice given by the great master of our time, one of the great master of our time.
Rajesh, one follow up on the prayer that we discussed earlier. So once you understand, or once you have a trust, like in the case of the child asking mom, or once you know that mother will do the best, or once we know that the Ishra will do the best, our prayer will also change, right? It will not be same as we are, because he knows he's
right.
So,
absolutely. But beginning stage, it is okay for the child to ask for the cookie. But once the child knows that, okay, my mother is going to give the right cookie, right food, once that trust is there, because right now it's all lip service for us. In the 7th chapter, Krishna said, right, there are 2, 3, 4 types of bhaktas approaching me. The 2 categories of bhakta, I am only a means for some other end. Right? So I worship God. What is my destination? Is God my destination, or is that lottery my destination?
Lottery.
And what is God?
Just a means.
It's an enabler for winning the lottery.
Yeah.
So that is the beginning stage. That's again, Krishna said that's okay. Artho jijnasu artharthi jnani. So artharthi and artha. Artha won't remember God anytime. When he is in trouble. So exam time, you see a lot of people goes to temple. When I was in college, I used to see this.
Right.
But again, this is not criticizing, but just an analysis. That's it. So the prayer itself is going to mature. And if you're really speaking, if you really think, what was that verse of Gita? Yata pravritti bhutanam yena sarvamidam tadam so karmana tadarchasya. What is the prayer? Your action.
Yeah.
When you help a person, when you give food to somebody, right? When you share your knowledge with somebody, when you give your listening ears to somebody, when you speak nicely to somebody, what exactly you are doing? You're worshipping him. That is the highest form of worship. You will see in the 17th chapter, the prayer is classified into 3 levels. The yajna is classified into 3 levels. The tapas is classified into 3 levels. The dana, the charity, is classified into 3 levels. All this is given. Right? So, like the Rajasic Yajna, Krishna said, Abhisandayadu Phalam, Mantra Hina Madakshinam. Like that, brilliant explanations are there, 17th chapter. By the way, like the final Jnana Yajna conducted by Swami Chinmayananda was on 16th and 17th chapter. You should listen to that talk. My God, he was at his best. It was one of the best lecture he has ever delivered. My God, he's great, but the examples and the way he presented those 2 chapters was amazing. If you can, means I can get the audio if you want, but it is amazing to listen.
Is it on YouTube, Rajaji?
No.
Okay. Bhagavad Gita talks. Rajaji, slightly tricky question, extension of what I asked before. Sorry about that, but if you're praying really intensely, if your child is crying really hard, can it make his mother change his mind?
Sometimes. So, answer is yes. Sometimes yes.
So can prayers change your destiny?
To a certain extent. The explanation is the prayer is a karma, and every karma has its result. So sometimes when your child craves for something which is not even healthy, you may allow that, right? A little bit here and there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that type of grace you can expect. In fact, chapter 7 calls that out. So if you are, means, because God knows that eventually it's a childish need and finally he will turn back to the real destination. For example, Swami Chinmayananda used to say, like, a child is crying for a horse, toy horse. The father may buy a toy horse. If you ask the child, what is your career ambition, the child may say that I want to become a horse rider.
Yeah.
But still, the father may just buy that wooden horse. He knows that after all, let him exhaust his desire and come back. So that type of things are there. See, the karma is very complicated, right? Gahanat karmana gati. So there is nothing wrong in praying. If you really pray, my experience is that it works.
Oh, totally.
Okay, so any other questions? Okay, so we will review this chapter end to end holistically next week. Any questions, post it in the WhatsApp group, and then we can continue to one of the best chapter of the Bhagavad Gita again. That chapter is Rajavidya Rajaguhyam. There are some brilliant verses in that chapter. Again, this topic is over. Kramamukti is over. So now it's pure Advaita Vedanta. There is nothing like this complicated. So this is good. So Anu, if you don't mind, could you do the Charama Shloka iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita? So at the end of the chapter, we chant this Charama Shloka, or the concluding prayer. So it tells iti Bhagavad Gita su, thus in the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishatsu means it is like an Upanishad. It is based upon the teachings of the Upanishad. Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastri. The subject matter of the Gita is twofold. One is the knowledge about absolute reality, and yoga. So yoga and knowledge. So if you really broadly classify, karma yoga, upasana yoga, and jnana is the topic of the Gita. Now it makes sense, right? So if you take any chapter, these are the three topics that is covered in the Gita. Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre, Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. This is a samvada, dialogue, mutual meaningful dialogue. There are different types of dialogue. Samvada, vada means argument. Two people are argument. Samvada means meaningful dialogue with mutual respect. That is samvada. And then there is vidanda. Then there is something called preaching. Preaching means it's one way. You cannot ask questions. In samvada, you are allowed to question. And vidanda means what? Whatever A is saying, the very fact that A said it, we will say that no. It's like opposition party, right? Whatever the government will say, the opposition will say opposite to that. So that is vidanda. So there are different types of conversations. And here the conversation is samvada. Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade, whatever chapter name, here it is Akshara Brahmo Namaha Ashtamodhyaya. That is the conclusion. So that's the meaning. So Anu, could you please chant?
Om Tatsaditi Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Akshara Parabrahma Yogo Nama Ashtamodhyayah.
Thank you.
Rajeshji, I have a question. I mean, it might be silly, but I just wanted to.
Sure, no, there is no question.
For the younger parents, I just wanted to understand. I wanted to tell them in a nicer way. So I want to ask you: by disciplining a child, does the mom? She's doing the right thing because that's what is expected, right? So is she doing her karma yoga, or is she doing it for her satisfaction, or is she doing it for the bhalai of the kid? For example, when you go to sleep, I've seen these young moms and parents and all, they dump the child into the crib, and the baby is crying forever. They said, okay, it has to be like that. 5 days, the baby will cry. Afterwards, it goes back to normal. But as grandparents or, like us, I cannot tolerate that because we have lived in a situation in India in a circumstance where we were always hugged and, by the parents and given that love of affection. So this kid, what they're doing is also correct because that's their job. They have to go to work. So their child has to get used to the routine. I understand. But where does this come? Under what category does it come?
Interesting question. And it's a very subjective question also.
Yes.
I will tell my perspective, but everybody can have different perspective. My perspective is most of the times, like the decision of discipline, is that come from an angry mind or a frustrated mind or a normal mind? 90% of the case, they are frustrated or they are upset and they react to situation. So
not really, because some of the parents, because
then it is okay,
all
right?
my own students are becoming parents now, so I see all this. So
I think if that is the case, it is okay. Like they know, every parent know that the child needs to be cared. And if that disciplinary action comes from proper understanding, not by an emotional knee-jerk reaction, then it is up to them. That may not be my way, but that is their way. That is what I would say. But if
by doing that, the child is going through a psychological.
That is another problem. Yeah, that is there. So sometimes what happens is parents do not understand the psychology, right? So in ancient times, they used to say that you should never express the love. What a ridiculous theory it is, right? So Swami Chinmayananda used to say, a love that is not expressed is like a gift that is well wrapped but never given. So you have to hug the child. You have to smile at the child. You need to talk to the child softly, and you need to express that love. So most of the people, the challenge, including me, I am also a victim of that. I cannot say exception. most of us do not know the art of parenting. Like, I wish there was some training given even before marriage. What is the right art of parenting? Probably you should try that, Bonaji. You are really good in that. As part of your initiative, probably some marriage, I mean, some counseling is given, right? What to expect? Because like most of the times, I've seen a lot of fighting also between couples, even old couples. Most of the times when I sit and listen to them, absolutely, it's all two different perspective and never matches. It's very easy if absolutely there is no problem. So the counseling is pretty much important to everybody. And
No, but what I find is, see, all my old students are parents now. They have kids, right? So what I find them is they go by the books. They'll read some book, the pediatric book, or whatever it says, and then the pediatrician also says. So they go by that, and I feel like life is not books only. Life is
right,
also comes with
there's
experience.
a human factor, right? So that
Right.
human factor combined with this knowledge, because
Right.
love has to be there, and love has to be expressive.
Yeah, no, going back to the question, I know it's a subjective thing. I already told you beginning itself, it's a silly question. But my point is, the mother, by doing that, she's doing her karma. Where does it fall? Like, because she's hurting a child, right?
I don't know. Like, is that sometimes that her again? It is subjective, right? So if that is for the benefit of the child and knowing that it is good for certain discipline, it's okay. But if it is out of anger and if it is out of frustration, that's wrong.
So you have to look at the source.
You have to look at the source, right? So most of the times, at least my experience is that the parents are upset, they're angry. That's the time they get punish the child, because otherwise that punishment would be gentle. So
And I see vigorous punishments, and it's really
yeah, so, but that punishment is you get upset, and at that moment you are reacting, and that is not good. That is wrong.
Okay. Right. So because I think that, okay, the mother's doing the duty, she's doing her karma, whatever it is.
No,
Her
sometimes
duty is to bring up the kids, right? So she has to put in all the thing. So when this is very interesting, because one of my students asked me this question, who's already a mother.
Yeah,
So
but being normal is overrated. Sometimes most of the people are not even acting up to normal. And Karma Yoga is saying that you have to be extraordinary. So if you really look at the graph of academics, right, the bell curve would be at C. But do you want to stay at C? You want to go to A and B. So practice Karma Yoga. It is going to give you that emotional maturity and stability.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so could you do the invocation?
Yeah. Okay. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavaseshyate. Om Shantis Shantis Shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Happy New Year and happy Vishu.
Yeah, happy.
All of you, our Ashirvadams to all of you.
Thank you, Ponaji.
Thank you very much. Yeah, happy.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank
It's
you.
tomorrow, right? Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yes, we should. Yeah.
Actually, the new year actually started this evening. So that's why we were in a satsang, and Surya ji had come from the Gurukula for us. So he was talking about New Year and all that. I couldn't get out and I couldn't say, I have to stop now.
No, that's fine.
Right.
Yeah. Of course.